We are here today to talk with Jenna Katsos, the artist behind the delightful work of Pen and Pine. We'll find out how she develops her ideas into reality.
I would encourage anybody who loves creating to continue creating. It doesn't need to be a job. It doesn't need to make them famous. It doesn't even need to be something that you share with people.
Hi, Jenna. Thanks for having us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
What was your inspiration to become an artist?
That's a tough question. I come from a really creative family, and so from the time I was young, we were always making things, and creativity was just part of life. It was just something that we did. And when I was in high school, I got really into art, and I decided to study art in college. So I went through college, studied studio art, and just kind of continued on. And then there was a stretch of time when I wasn't creating. Something they don't teach you in college is how to make your living as an artist and how to actually practically apply all the skills that they've taught you. And so I had a tough time transitioning into a functioning adult who also wanted to make things. And when I moved to Humboldt, there was a time when I realized that I just missed making things. And that's when I decided that I wanted to make it a priority and make it a bigger part of my life.
What was it that veered you into the art scene?
Specifically in Humboldt, there's such an amazing art scene, and it is really part of the everyday life here. I started going to Arts Alive, and I started meeting people who were more connected, and then I kind of carved out my own art scene, if that makes any sense. I just started surrounding myself with creative people, with makers, with a lot of female makers, and we just kind of supported each other, and I grew this little personal arts community.
How would you describe your style?
I would describe my style as whimsical, natural, and educational. I often talk about my style as a little bit wonky. There's something about my drawings that is, my lines aren't quite straight, and that's the way I like it. There's something very hand-drawn about them.
What is it that satisfies you about your work?
I just love drawing. I know it sounds cheesy, but there's just something about creating work. My work is super functional. I put it out into the world on objects that can be used and displayed. And there's something so wonderful about seeing my pieces out in the wild. I still get excited when I see them on someone's car, or I see someone wearing one of my pins. Or a couple weeks ago, I was telling someone I was an artist, and they were like, "What do you make?" And I said, "Well, I'm an illustrator. I draw," and I kind of described what I draw. And then she said, "Oh, like this?" and pulled her bag out, and it was a bag I made. And I said, "Precisely like that." That's my bag.
Mm-hmm. What is the story behind the name of Pen and Pine?
Pen and Pine is the first thing I've ever named. I've had a lot of pets, but I'm the youngest of kids in my family, so I never got to name any of our pets.
Oh.
And then all the pets I've had as an adult came with names when I got them. And so naming my business was this moment of like, I get to name something. This is something I get to put a name on. And I wanted something that described what I do and described kind of the aesthetic I'm going for. There was something about an alliteration that was really appealing, and then I love ampersands and kind of that plus sign. And honestly, I sat down and I listed a whole bunch of names, and I shared them with a lot of people to see what they thought, and I settled on Pen and Pine, and I have never considered changing it. It feels very right.
Right. Is there an idea or a concept that you'd like to explore but just haven't done yet?
There are millions. I have pages and pages of ideas that someday hopefully I'll get to. But one that I've been wanting to do for a long time and I finally am getting around to is a coloring book. And like a series of fairly intricate black and white illustrations that people can then color. And I have always been drawn to the idea because it's like I get to create something, but then people are invited to add to it and to interact with it in a really interesting way. And I've drawn some coloring postcards and other things, and finally I was like, why are you not putting this in a coloring book? And so, yeah, I'm going to start compiling that, and that's an idea that's been in my brain for a really long time, so it feels so good to actually make it happen.
Or putting it all together so that way it can be a nice compendium of art and coloring.
Yeah. I love that idea of artwork as something accessible, and it's not super precious. It's not something that you put on a wall and never touch.
So what's the subject that you're thinking of putting into your coloring books?
It's a lot of the same. I definitely have been exploring a certain set of subjects lately, a lot of florals, a lot of nature. I'm really inspired by this place and the Pacific Northwest, the things that make this place so special. And at the same time, I'm always thinking about ways to make my artwork and my products something that would have a broader appeal to people who don't live in Humboldt County. And so it's a real kind of back and forth that I'm constantly doing, but I am definitely going to do some wildflowers and some pollinators and probably some seasonal illustrations that kind of try to capture the different times of the year. And I was actually just asking people for ideas, and there's a lot of awesome ideas like beach walk and some sort of like Bigfoot search and find situation. So yeah, really not a big departure from my other work. Playing off similar themes and really trying to kind of capture this area, but also make it something that everyone from anywhere could really appreciate.
So what is it about your work that brings you joy?
Honestly, so many things about it, but I think that there's something really fun about being able to communicate something new through work.
So is this something that you're really interested in, nature and greenery and fruits?
Absolutely. I get most of my inspiration from my garden. I think it's just the matter of being out here in the garden all the time. And I love to draw things that are in season. That's always kind of what inspires me. And so right now we're seeing a lot of raspberries and blackberries, a lot of California poppies. We're lucky to live in a place where there's almost always something blooming too. So there's always something to be inspired by in the garden.
I've also noticed the medium that you're currently using. Have you always worked with an iPad or digitally?
I have only been working on the iPad for about 2 years. When I first started drawing, I was just using pens and paper. And one of the reasons I actually started drawing is because it was cheap and it didn't take a lot of space. And at that point in my life, those were important things. And I switched over to the iPad about 2 years ago, and honestly, I was really reluctant to switch over. I didn't think it would capture the same feeling of drawing, and there's something about the feel that's really important for creating. But I was so pleasantly surprised, and it makes my life so much easier. And I can draw on the go, and I can draw in my lap if I need to. And like this piece that I'm working on, I was able to sketch. I can make layers. I can darken and lighten things and make changes after the fact. And I find that it just really ignited my creativity in a way that I absolutely didn't expect.
Because you actually can change certain aspects of the artwork while you're working on it?
Yeah, you can try things. It's not as big of a commitment to like try a new color. And I think being adventurous in creating is often really hard because it's, you know, oh, what if I don't like it? What if it comes out? What if I ruin it? And so you play it safe. And so this really allows me to take chances and to try stuff. And I find that it just really helps my process a lot. The fact that I have been able to carve out this life for myself where I get to do something that I love, the flexibility of drawing, the way it can happen anywhere, anytime, the way it helps me communicate and get ideas that are kind of bouncing around in my head out, that is really enjoyable. Almost every aspect of it I enjoy.
Is there someone in the art community or someone in your life that inspired you to do art?
Locally, I have a great community of artists and we really inspire each other and lift each other up. One of those people is Mur da Silva, and she is just a great power for helping me continue. And I feel like being an artist, it's an interesting occupation and it's super challenging. You often work alone, and so building that community of other people who've had similar challenges and have worked through them, and people that you can tap into when things are tough, has been really beneficial, and Humboldt has an incredible community for something like that.
Do you have anything to say for a young artist getting into the scene?
I took a very roundabout way to get where I am. I often hear from folks like, oh, I wish I was creative. You just have to keep doing it. And I think that we live in a time where a lot of what people do is for fame or fortune. And I think it's a great reminder that you can just do something for joy and you can do it for yourself. And so creating doesn't need to be this massive thing. It can just be kind of a private practice. And so that's what I'd want to encourage.
Jenna, thank you so much for allowing us in your space and showing us the process of your work.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you could come out and see how I create this work in this space.
And thank you for joining us on Studio Space.